Hello and welcome to New Play Day on Shakesyear. Today we get to start digging into King John, which is interesting. It's a history play that I don't see performed very often. I saw one production of it. It was a fairly scaled down production because that's what that particular company does. But yeah, I don't see King John done very much. So there's some stuff that you'll need to know that I'm also learning as we go along because we need to set the context for this. Historically speaking, King John was the son of King Henry III. So from a timeline perspective, King John takes place before any of the Henrys that we have previously studied. And I would say forget about the Henrys, but don't forget about the Henrys because we worked really hard on them and they were a lot of fun. So King John was the youngest son of Henry III. His older brothers being William, Geoffrey, Henry, and Robert I. William, Henry, and Geoffrey died before any of them was able to take the throne. Richard, the brother, had been king. Richard died, and that's how King John became king. However, for the purposes of this play, and for the beginning of Act 1, Scene 1, it's important to note that Geoffrey had a widow named Constance, another character who we'll get to meet a little bit later in this play, and Constance had a son named Arthur. So technically, through the laws of ascension, or whatever those are called, Arthur, being the son of an elder brother, should have taken the throne when Richard died, as opposed to King John taking it. So King John is aware of the fact that his claim to the throne is somewhat tenuous, and his nephew actually has a more legit claim on the throne that he does, or at least historically speaking, it's said that he was. But also historically speaking, there's at least rumors that King John became King Henry III's favorite son, and therefore probably also Queen Eleanor's favorite son. So Queen Eleanor is also in this play. She's the Queen Mother. She is John's mom. And at the very beginning of the play, Act 1, Scene 1, we've got John, we've got Eleanor, we've got a bunch of people, and we have Chatillon, who I think that's how you pronounce it. He's like an ambassador from France who has come to say something, and John's like, "What you got to say?" And he's like, "Well, France believes that Arthur should be king instead of you, and France is standing completely behind Arthur, being Geoffrey's son. He's got the more legit claim, so stand down, give all of your lands and titles to him, or we're going to go to war." And King John, being somewhat overprotective and defensive, I guess, knowing that his claim to the throne is somewhat tenuous, is like, "Oh yeah, France? Yeah, you think you're gonna, no, I'm gonna take you to war, and I'm gonna get back to France before you can even tell them that I'm coming to go to war with them." So Chatillon leaves with that, and Pembroke is tasked with starting the war in France before anything else can happen. And then there's a little moment between Eleanor and King John, which kind of shows us that she might be one pulling the strings behind King John's reign, or at least that she's a very trusted advisor or something like that to him. And then a messenger comes in and is like, "We got a really weird situation going on out here. I'm going to bring these two guys in." John's like, "All right, bring them in." So in come Philip the Bastard, as he is called throughout the play. Sometime in the first folio, he's referred to just as Bastard through the whole thing. He doesn't even really get a name. And also Robert Faulconbridge. And it turns out that Philip is the eldest son of Robert Faulconbridge Sr., Robert Faulconbridge being the younger son of Robert Faulconbridge Sr., but the younger Robert Faulconbridge, who's standing there right now, says that Philip was a bastard, therefore he gets no claim to the inheritance, no lands, no titles, any of that kind of stuff. And they are bringing this suit in front of the king because Philip claims that he is legitimate and therefore the eldest son of Robert Faulconbridge, so he should get the lands and titles and all of that kind of fun stuff. So he protests, and the king and queen are like, "But okay, but if you're the older one but you're the heir, does that mean you come from different moms?" or that sort of thing. Philip's like, no, from the same mom and most likely from the same dad, but for like he's just trying to cheat me out of my money and whatever. And there's a lot of back and forth between Philip and King John. And then finally, young Robert Faulconbridge, who's standing there right now, gets to say something, and he's like, Your Highness, your brother, that being former King Richard, and Philip is like, oh, shut your face. But Robert just keeps speaking, and he says, and once dispatched him in an embassy to Germany, there with the emperor, to treat of high affairs touching that time. The advantage of his absence took the king, and in the meantime sojourned at my father's, where how he did prevail, I shame to speak. But truth is truth. Large lengths of sea and shores between my father and my mother lay, as I have heard my father speak himself, when this same lusty gentleman was got. Upon his deathbed, he, by will, bequeathed his lands to me, and took it on his death that this, my mother's son, was none of his. If he were, he came into the world full 14 weeks before the course of time. Then, good my liege, let me have what is mine, my father's land, as was my father's will. So, what Robert Faulconbridge is saying here, he doesn't want to shame his mother and say that his mom was sleeping around or anything like that, but there was this period of time when Robert Faulconbridge Sr. was sent off to Germany by King Richard I, so kind of sort of King John's brother's fault if the mom, Robert Faulconbridge's mom, was left alone, and maybe somebody stopped by, and if we're going to count backwards and say like a woman has to be pregnant for X long, like if she had gotten pregnant with Philip the Bastard when Robert Faulconbridge Sr. came back, then the baby was 14 weeks early. And how can Philip therefore be the product of mom and dad? He has to be the product of mom and some other dad. So that is Robert Faulconbridge's claim to his own inheritance, that sort of thing. This is what he's saying. He's like, the math just doesn't add up. The kid was born too soon for him to be the product of my mom and my dad. So he's a bastard. I get my inheritance, right? Tomorrow we get to hear how the king responds. So anyway, welcome to King John. Welcome to King John and history. Yay, history lessons. I'll see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.